actually, why it was funny was because I used Carywise to save for my wedding. We focus on what customers need and not what they want. What you want is you want to save, but you also want to eat from the money. One of our mantras, for example, like for this Lagos State partnership, is actually no woman left behind. And the context is that you should understand your budgeting. You should understand the 50, 30, 20 rule of budgeting, knowing fully that if you have 100 naira, for example, 50 naira should go to your needs, 30 naira to your wants, and 20 naira to saving.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Influence X podcast. My name is Toluwani Shonira, and I'll be your host for this amazing podcast session. Thank you so much for joining us from wherever part of the world that you're watching us from. And we're excited, to have you on board. Our topic for today is driving technology adoption in the fintech market, in the fintech space, the power of strategic communications. And with me here is a very seasoned, I would say professional, Grillo Adeyimi. He is the lead marketing and growth for Carywise in Nigeria. And I'm sure if you're Nigerian and you're watching, I don't have to talk too much because you know Carywise. Hello, Grillo. Hi, how are you doing today?
Hi, how are you doing?
Very
Glad
fine.
to be here. Looking forward to an insightful conversation.
Thank you so much for joining. I can also see that we are matching.
I don't know how you planned it, but it just happened to happen.
Yeah, because it was not we didn't plan it at all. Very good. You look dapper. I like your filler. Filler is cap. If you're watching, because
you look pretty good yourself.
Thank you. So, let's quickly get into the conversation. Yeah. So before we even start officially, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like our listeners and our viewers would want you to give us an insight into who you are, the trajectory of your life, and how you have now found yourself in this role that you're currently in.
Okay. Again, thank you for inviting me to this podcast. My name is Grillo Adeyimi. I lead the marketing and growth team at Carywise, and I've been doing so since 2022, February 2022, actually. So it's a little over 2 years now. My background has always been in marketing, design, and advertising. I kicked off in one of the biggest agencies at the time in 2014, Noaza Communications. I was an art director there. At the time, I worked with the creatives in-house to build campaigns for multinational brands at the time. So MultiChoice, GoTV, DSTV, clients like Friesland Campina, Three Crowns, and a bunch of other clients. From then, I moved to other agencies, BBDO specifically, which was part of the DDB group at the time. Before I moved finally to Insights, I think that was in 2019 or thereabout. There as well, I also worked on other big brands as well, specifically SBC, Pepsi at the time. So
nice.
We were the ones responsible for most of their big campaigns at the time. We worked on Pepsi Max when it came into the market for a while. We worked on a lot of their music campaigns with the big artists, Wizkid, Burna Boy at the time.
Wow.
Right. So I was there for about a year and a couple of months actually. Then I took a 1 year sabbatical where I just did nothing. Not did nothing, but I just took like a 1 year leave from work. And so during that time, I met Razak Ahmed, the CEO of Carywise at the time. And my wife was working there, I think a year prior.
Wow.
And I remember at the time they needed a consultant. So the 1 year sojourn was basically me doing my freelance consultation. Mm-hmm. So if anyone needed any kind of marketing input, you wanted to plan a campaign, and you come to meet me and I'll organize it and plan it from end to end. Right. So at the time, my wife was working there a year prior, and I remember Carywise needed help with a media campaign. They wanted to do some things for OOH and radio at the time. So one of the things they were thinking of doing at the time was, and which is most likely something we'll delve into later on, like the fact
Yeah.
that the historically they have always liked to approach marketing from an experimental perspective, right? Rather than taking a
Very
large
good.
sum of money and like
Just
dumping it into
dumping
one
it.
campaign where you're not sure it will work. The idea has always been to start small, like, and tweak along the way before you scale, right? So I remember what one of the things we wanted to do then was to do a location-based campaign, right? So they had a partnership with Ebano at the time, Ebano and trying to remember this filling station. I can't quite remember the name. Yeah, but
Okay.
basically the idea was to place specific ads at those locations, and they needed the idea to be nuanced and location specific, right? So I had to come up with the campaign. One of my copywriter friends. So that's technically how I kind of got introduced to Razak Ahmed and Carrywise. And I mean, they must have liked the campaign because they brought me on board a
Obviously.
couple of months later, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the trajectory in a nutshell. I moved across agencies. I worked from advertising, design, and marketing, core marketing, before landing at
Yeah.
Carrywise.
That's brilliant. If I must say, there's always this, I would say, notion where people feel like, oh, if you get into a particular profession, you just have to do that one profession, right? And for you, you are a well-rounded individual because you've moved from advertising to
Yeah.
design. Now you're in marketing, and I think that journey is really good, really
Thank you.
inspiring. Well
Thank
done.
you.
Yeah. So now that we have I feel like our listeners and viewers now know you. I think now we can move over to the corporate comms side. So everyone knows Carrywise, but I feel for the sake of this podcast, for the people who don't know what Carrywise is, I'd like you to tell us, about Carrywise, what makes Carrywise unique in the fintech space, especially at a time now, in Nigeria and in Africa, where fintech startups are coming up, every other day, right? And how you're helping to drive financial inclusion in the country.
Okay. I may say a lot of questions packed into one, right? But I'll just take it from the top down.
Yes.
Before I even talk about Carrywise, I think the interesting thing about Carrywise is one of the reasons why I believe in the brand is, and which is funny because I started using Carrywise even before I started working here. So it's not like I'm using it because I work here, right? I've been using it like 2 years prior.
Wow.
I think 2020. I started using it around, and actually, why it was funny was because I used Carrywise to save for my wedding, which was why it was interesting.
Oh my goodness!
Right, because then when I used to talk to the CX people, it was funny because now I like work with them.
Yeah.
And there's a particular person that I always wanted to talk to at the time, and she's a portfolio manager now, Basirat. So then anytime I had issues or I needed a withdrawal, I needed like some kind of help, she's the one I would contact. And 2 years down the line, like she was my colleague. So it was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I think it's one of the things I tell people when I preach Carrywise. I'm not preaching Carrywise to you because I work there. Like I'm preaching it to you because I've used it. And it's the only, I can tell you that probably 90% of all my funds is in Carrywise. Wow. Right. So it's not just because I work there, and this has been like historically, right? So, like just take my money from the bank and put it on Carrywise. That has been like the pattern, right? So to say what Carrywise is and what we do is that in the simplest terms, Carrywise is a digital wealth manager, right? So our job in this case is for customers to give us their money, and we try to invest it so that we can grow your money for you, right? And initially in the early days, we used to have taglines like we have better rates than your bank and things like that, because we all know like what happens when you put your money in the bank. And no offense or no shade to banks, right? I think it's common knowledge, right? You put your money in the bank, you're getting debit, SMS charge, discharge. You had 1,000 naira, by the time you come back 6 months later, it has reduced, right? So the context for why we do what we do is, instead of keeping your money sitting in the bank, like we can help you grow your money, right? That's where the context of helping you put your money to work, helping you get your money working. Basically, it's you it's technically like you going to the gym and having to work to build your muscle. It's technically the same thing. You can do the same thing with your money rather than going to a gym that doesn't have equipment. Why not bring it to CareerWise and help you grow it, right? So basically, we're a digital wealth manager, and what that means is that as much as we have a physical office, you don't have to come to the office to transact. You can do it from your phone anywhere in the world, right? So far, you have mobile device, you have internet, and you have BVN. You can sign up, you can download the app, you can put your funds and lock your funds, right? So I think that's the context of the digital side of it, right? The fact that you can do it anywhere, anytime. You can withdraw anytime you want, you can top up anytime you want because it's digital, right? So we see ourselves as digital wealth managers for the generation of young Nigerians, and young Nigerians obviously because they fit this category, right? Digitally savvy, tech savvy, have mobile devices, have internet. What we're really trying to do is to build a generation of wealthy Nigerians. That's what CareerWise does in a nutshell. Then in terms of what makes us unique, I would say that we have positioned ourselves to give customers what they need, not what they want. Right. And it's kind of weird, not weird per se, but it's like half, right? Because the thing is, we understand as wealth manager, and which is why it's also interesting, right? The fact that apart from the engineering teams and the marketing teams, like the foundation has been built by people who are finance professionals, right? So the CEO, for example, Razak Ametla, like he's a CFA holder, our account officer, our portfolio manager, so they know money, right? So this is not just about building a product, it's about building a product, but structured in such a way that we are taking your money, investing it so you can get good returns, right? So the context of what customers need is most of what we have done from a financial education perspective has always been to tell people about building long-term wealth, right? And if you really do some research, you'll see that a lot of the American economy has been built on the altar of mutual funds, which is why we made sure that we can offer mutual funds. But the most likely way you benefit from mutual funds is to play the long game, right? And to take advantage of compounding. So it's not you want to save for 2 months and then 2 months you can't build wealth. You can't build wealth that way, especially if you are most of us that we're not trust fund babies, and I mean we don't have one inheritance somewhere, right? So you're going to build that wealth over time, and especially because you really think about the context of what, to a large extent, unless some of us are extremely lucky, there's a high chance we are basically just trying to lay the foundation for the generations to come, right? So in this context is I want to do these things, but I know I might not be the one that will benefit, but I want to be able to build wealth in such a way that I can set my children up.
Yeah.
So most likely to be the second, third generation that really benefit from that long-term wealth, because it's a long time, right? And most people don't want to wait for that long time. Most people don't want to wait for 10, 20 years, 30 years. Because why are you telling me to stay like 30 years? I like, I want to enjoy my money now, right?
I work for my money. So
exactly. So which is why I mean by we focus on what customers need and not what they want. What you want is you want to save, but you also want to eat from the money. Yeah, I'm not going to build that long-term wealth if you don't have that long-term perspective, right? So which is why our core savings product, for example, is a locked product, right? So, and the major context for trying to build for what customers need is that financial discipline. And which is why I said it can be tricky because it's half, right? You find a lot of people, a lot of us, like culturally, we claim we want to be disciplined, but discipline is hard, right? Discipline is tough. Like you're saying at the beginning of the year, I want to go to gym every three times a week. And you always see it actually when you go to the gym in January. If you're a gym rat, you will know. When you go in January,
I'm a gym rat. So,
I'm sure you know. Yeah. When you go in January, you see a lot of people because new year, new me. I must get that 6-pack. Like my tummy must go down. You see a lot of people, but just watch as time goes on, the numbers tend to dwindle. And that's the thing about discipline. So it's the same thing. You say, I want to take my financial life seriously. I want to do that. After a while, just kind of life just happens. And I mean, it's not wrong. And we can't blame people. Like I said, discipline is hard. But which is why on our part, we try to entrench it into the products. Yeah. So which is why we don't have, as much as we give an offer of flexibility, our core savings product is locked, right? So in this context, once you sign up today, you create a plan, a savings plan. going to be locked. So you need to pick the duration, right? It's going to be locked for either 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or 1 year, right? But we also have like a flexible saving, which we call emergency. And also because we understand that, I mean, things can happen.
Yeah.
You don't want to have a fund that is locked for 3 months and then something
And you
happens.
can't
And
open it.
yeah, which is why it gets more interesting, because the context of what people want is also that it's my money and I want control of my money, right? Which is why I said it's half-half, because what we have seen fundamentally that not everyone likes that. So you see that those carcass of people don't gravitate towards Kaiwise because you guys are too strict. And I mean, if you check Twitter sometimes, you see some funny conversations. And I mean, which is also good because over time, we are also kind of been able to build like advocates, right? So when you hear someone complaining on Twitter, well, I put my money in Kaiwise, and I call their customer service people and they are telling me that I can't get it. You see someone like on Twitter just almost, there's nothing you can do. Like you can even cry. I tell them you're in trouble. What you do? Like
Nothing
that
will
money.
happen.
And it's not because we don't want to help, but it's really just because of the structure we have built. Right. So basically, when you give us money to lock in a plan, we don't have the money sitting in some bank, right? Which is also one of the requirements of our SEC licensing, right? We have a custodian that warehouses or holds those funds. So the money is not with us and it has to go through a process. And because we have taken the money and invested, it's not just something we can just go and pluck and just, okay, this person said they want their money, so let me go and bring it and give the person back. The structure doesn't work like that, right? So, which is what I mean by our major USP is the fact that we give people what they need and not what they want. In this case, is discipline. We make sure that we have built the infrastructure to help you, especially for people that find it
Discipline.
hard,
To
right? So I think so on the flip side, you also see a lot of people that say, hey, that I'm so grateful that this thing was locked, because I know if it wasn't locked, I'd have
I would
taken it
have
and I'd have
spent all
spent
the
it.
money.
And that's the funny
That's
thing
good.
about money that you have in your pocket. You just go out to Lagos and before you know, like 100K has gone. I can't.
Okay,
I
I'm
want it
even
like
saying 10,000, like 100K.
like you just wonder where it has gone to. And I think that's the dangerous thing about having money in hand that wasn't planned.
Yeah.
So which is why our ESP in summary is basically we try to educate people on how to plan. We try to make sure that we help you stay disciplined by giving you the infrastructure to lock your funds for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or 1 year. But I mean, like I said, we're also flexible. You could have a locked savings plan, but you could also have invested in a mutual fund, or you could also have your money in an emergency plan, for example, in more flexible saving.
Yeah.
So yeah, USP is basically discipline. We try to
Wow.
help people stay disciplined, try to help people build wealth
Yeah,
long term.
I think I like what I'm hearing because like you said, discipline is not easy,
Yeah.
right? And I can see that from some of the things that you said. You said you give the customers what they need, not what they want, and like I just said, discipline is so important, and it's glad that Carrywise is actually, doing something about that,
Yeah,
in
thank you.
the fintech space.
Thank you.
So now to our next question. So Nigeria has, would I say, an unbanked population. So studies show that these unbanked populations, can range from about 25% to about, 36%. How is Cowrywise able to communicate their value, to people who are not familiar with Cowrywise? To this, unbanked population, how are you able to reach them?
Okay. I mean, so the data that you mentioned, I think is pretty close to home.
Yeah.
I know before we came up here, we are talking about a previous report from EF INA.
Yeah.
I think that was 2023. And I mean, the major reason why I bumped into that report is because we're currently working with Lagos State to educate women in underserved areas.
That's amazing.
Right. We just kicked off last week. That's been in the works for a while. I think since August or September. So, but we just kicked off last week. And I'm mentioning this because it makes a good segue to your question, right? So, based on our current infrastructure, we're not positioned to help the unbanked currently, right? Although we have something in the works in that regard, right? But currently, we can't serve them as we want to serve them. And I mean, it's expected. To use Carrywise, you have to fit a set criteria. You have to have a smartphone. You have to have access to internet. And most importantly, you have to have fronts, right? Whether it's a monthly income, if you're an employee, or at least regular inflow, right? Depending on your occupation. If you're a trader or whatever, depending on your occupation, you need to fit those three criteria.
Yeah.
So if you don't meet any of those criteria, it's going to be difficult to use CarryWise, right? But like I said, we have something in the works to serve those audiences directly, right? But what we can do, or what we are doing in that regard, is to make sure that even though they can't use CarryWise, and ultimately because it's not really about us to a large extent, it's really about ensuring that these people are not left behind,
Yeah.
right? So one of our mantras, for example, like for this Lagos State partnership, is actually no woman left behind. And the context
Very
is that they want to reach out to women in underserved areas, right? So people in hard to reach areas
Yeah.
that, hey, we have these people. I mean, they are indigenous of Lagos State, but we also don't want them to feel left behind, right? Because they are like far away from civilization, from the hustle and bustle of Lagos. But we also want to instill in them a sense of hope, right? So we know it can't, to a large extent, we can't come in from a product side, but where we can come in for is what we are known for, which is financial education,
Yeah.
right? So which is the basis of how we are reaching these underbanked and unbanked women,
Yeah.
right? Is to say you might not have access to a phone, but it doesn't mean you can't have access to financial knowledge. It doesn't mean you should not be financially literate, right?
That's really good.
It doesn't matter if you even use another product, for example. Maybe there's another product that you can use with a future phone, for example, which
Yeah.
is fine. But I think for us is looking at the bigger picture and knowing fully well and understanding fully well that a more financially literate Nigeria is better for all of us in the ecosystem as a whole.
Yeah.
Right.
That's an amazing way to look at it.
What we have done is to basically come in from that position to say, hey, okay, we can do this with you and we'll focus on the financial literacy part, right? So we have a couple of facilitators on board. We are also looking to employ teachers who are fluent in indigenous languages, right? Knowing fully well that we might go to some communities, for example, maybe they can't speak a lot of English, maybe they speak more of Yoruba. Another community, maybe it's more indigenous Igbo that are there. But the idea is we want to make sure that we can reach them properly, right? And we make sure that we at least teach them and leave behind the basics of financial literacy and personal finance. So you should understand income and expense. You should understand your budgeting. You should understand the 50, 30, 20 rule of budgeting, knowing fully well that if you have 100 naira, for example, 50 naira should go to your needs, 30 naira to your wants, and 20 naira to saving. Like, that's not the kind of thing that it's the kind of thing that everybody needs, regardless of your economic status, because you need to save, you need to budget, otherwise money just disappears. You make money today and the money is gone. I can't account for it, right? So from our own perspective currently, like I mentioned, we are building something to cater to people in those categories. But in the meantime, we're also not going to fold our hands and do nothing. We'll always keep looking for opportunities like this to make sure that we continue spreading the word of financial literacy and personal finance.
You mentioned something that a financial literate Nigeria is better for all of us in the long term. And I think that it's so good that even though you cannot, with the products that you have, because of the design, you can't reach those people, you are doing something about it, and you are putting out, financial literacy, you are educating the women who are in these undeserved communities to know about saving. Because once you empower, a woman, right, to know how to save, she would teach her children, and those ones would. So you're basically, empowering the nation. So I really think I'm quite happy. I'm quite happy with your answer. Yeah. So the next is, now we'll be talking about your target audience. I know that you've been talking about your target audience, even in the two questions, that you just answered. And they're the younger, tech savvy, Nigerians, like you said, who have a phone, who have access to internet, and who have some form of income, coming in. What would you say are some of the communication strategies that have been most successful in capturing their attention? Because as you know, we live in a world where there's so much noise. Like, you go on social media, for example, and if something doesn't capture your interest in like 6-7 seconds, you're swiping up. So how has Carrywise been able to really, would I say, solidify their place in the minds of their target audience?
So when during my days back when I was still doing like co-advertising, there was a book that a friend of mine asked me to read. Um, he had the background in strategy, right? So, which is why I picked up some of my strategy basics. I mean, I'm obviously not as good as he is, but I mean, I think he introduced me to having a little eye for strategy. But I
Yeah.
think the book also gave me a lot of perspective in how to approach communication and especially advertising. So the book was, if I remember correctly, Case for Creativity.
Case for
The Case
creativity.
for Creativity. And why I like the book, and it's also most likely what inspired my sojourn to fintech, the fact that you have a lot of data, you can actually track what you do, right? I think from a creative side, most of us creatives then, I mean, we just do as, but really don't know how it's helping.
Effective.
Exactly, we don't know if it's effective. We don't know if it's helping the client, and the clients, yeah, for some reason they tend to withhold that data, right? So on the creative part, you're designing, you're writing your stories, you're writing your ads, you're seeing your TV, but you don't really know exactly what it's doing for you, right? But on the fintech side, like you have the data, right? I'm exposed to all the data, right? I can run an ad, I can tell directly, like, am I converting from this? Are people buying my product? Are people signing up?
True.
Right? And I think that book kind of gave me like a mind shift, because the summary of everything he said was that creative work always performs better than average work. Maybe average work might not be best, but like normal work that you see.
Yeah.
And what he did was to side by side compare data of campaigns that were deemed as creative versus campaigns that were ordinary. And in all cases, creative campaigns always performed better. They were always more effective. And it's really because there's the understanding that we're in the attention economy, which is why it's interesting that I mentioned attention. We're in an attention economy. There are so many things trying to grapple for the customer's attention. And I mean, we have the same 24 hours, you have the same amount of time. Yeah, as much as the trends currently show that we spend more time on our mobiles, but there are so many things fighting for your attention. So the context is, how do you stand out of the clutter?
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I've also had conversations with people where they tell me people have short attention spans. I don't think that's right. I think it's
Really?
a fallacy.
Okay.
And I think it's just that it's not about short attention span, but most people will have that kind of behavior for something they're not really interested in. If you're interested in a piece of content, you will most likely watch it. You will most likely read it, whether it's a long form content or whether it's writing or video format. If I've piqued your interest, I'll watch it to the end, right? Um, so going back to the book, I think so that kind of laid the foundation for like how I approach like marketing work, and also that's kind of trickled down into what we do
Yeah.
as Carrywise, right? So one of the things we always try to do are two things, right? So currently we know we live, like I said, in an attention economy. So one of the things we always try to leverage from a communications perspective is to create content that people will find useful, people will find valuable. And it's not really far-fetched. Like, we all share memes, we all share videos. My wife shares me, like, if I open my Instagram now, right? I mean, the comparison will be
The
wild, because
reels.
it's probably like a ratio of 10 to 1. Like, she'll send me 10. I'm like, babe, I can't watch all these things you sent to me now. So the context of a content loop in this case is that you create content that customers love. There's a high likelihood that they will share it with somebody else.
Yeah.
That person shares it on their timeline, and it keeps circulating, right? So that's always been very important for us to create content that people want. And this context is also us being able to do the research to find out what our customers consuming now, in what format. Is it short film? Is it a little bit of long form? Is it humor? And based on that, we always try to optimize the kind of content that we create. So that's on one side. The second side is now the fact that we always try to be innovative, because we know innovation will get you more traction, will get you more capability, will
Very
get
true.
you more eyeballs. So, for example, it's one of the reasons why we are very particular about our special day campaigns. So, special day campaigns are the Father's Day, Mother's Day, all those kind of campaigns, right? So, And it's interesting because customers also know, right? If you go online, you most likely see like on special days, customers are waiting to see, okay, which brand is going to outbest which brand, like what brand is going to do what. And it has always been important for us because we understand why those days are important. It's Father's Day, it's Mother's Day. You want to wish someone a happy Father's Day. We have always made sure that we are not the brand that just puts a
Just
tie
put
and just says
anything
happy
together
Father.
and just
Anybody can do that.
That's
So the
true.
context has always been, how can we do stuff that other people are not going to do, right? So for Father's Day, for example, I think in 2021 we had Paint with Dad, if I remember correctly, right? So we asked a couple of people to come with their dads and paint with them, and the idea for us has always been to not just say or wish people happy birthday. We want people to feel it. We want people to experience it, right? So we ask people to come with their dads to have a painting session, and I mean, it's a bonding experience. It's probably one of those things that you won't forget, right? Because you're going to take the painting home, you're going to hang it on the wall, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have guests that, what
Yeah,
happened
and
here?
to
Like,
form
did
a
you
core
paint this?
memory.
It's just something that you just never forget. It taste never
Yeah.
leaves your mouth, right? And to a large extent, that's how we approach most of what we do. Like, we want to make sure that we leave a kind of lasting impression, right? So beyond the fact that we're already solving a problem, we know from a brand perspective, we need to be able to build brand power. And brand power in this context will help us with memorability, with talkability, top of mind. So we have kind of maintained it across board. So for Children's Day this year as well, I know we went to a particular school, if I remember correctly, and we interviewed a couple of kids. So technically, like almost like this Kids Say the Daniel Steen show type of
Oh,
thing,
really?
where we asked people about money. And I mean, there was one particular question that went viral. I think in a day or two, had probably about maybe 2 million views on Twitter.
Wow.
I mean, it was a funny question because we asked one of the kids, what would they do with 100K? Some of them were saying they will buy a house. I was like, oh, you can't buy out the 100K
house
now.
you want
Like,
to buy?
what do you mean? Right? So, it really just goes to show how far we'll go to make sure that we tell a good story around special days, right? I mean, Independence Day this year as well, we had like a poem that was rendered by a spoken word person, fantastically done. Last year, the year before, we did Paint with Dad. The year after, we did Portrait with Dad. So we called people and asked them. We asked for people who didn't have pictures with their dads, which is weird that people don't have pictures with their dads. I mean, so and we had a photography session with all of them. We took their pictures, we framed them, gave it to them same day. And it's also just something you live in here. We just really want to optimize for experiences and to do things differently. Right. Another example I can think about is I think in January this year, we started like a billboard campaign.
Okay.
Right. And this was kind of our first real outing for billboard, right? And I mean, the thinking was like, how can we be radical? How can we do it differently? How can we gain traction? We just decided that, hey, why not just put Kaiba as a commodity? But I was like, what do you mean? Like, how can you just put like your brand name on the board? Like, it's not done. That's not how it's supposed to be. Blah, blah, blah. So it has always just been, like I said, we zig when others are zagging. Right. So I think we put it up in January or so. I think sometime in February, like there was a Twitter storm about it. Like, a good friend of the house saw it, took a picture and put it on Twitter, and he was like, I like this. And then Twitter just went up, right? Especially the marketers in this case. But so it was like two sides of the divide. Like, how can you like spend money on a billboard, no city, no da 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 da? I mean, and some other people are saying, hey, you guys are doing what they want you to do, you are talking about it. Yeah, that was the idea.
To get people to talk.
Yeah, because like I mentioned, it's really to gain traction. There's nothing you're not going to get a lot of impact. Like I said, the case for creativity, you're going to get more impact by doing stuff that is conventionally different.
Yes.
Right. And I think for that particular board, it was important for us because it really just showed us to what extent that things like this can stay in the customer's mind. We understand that billboard is not a core conversion channel. No one stands at a billboard to scan a QR code. And the idea for us was that, how can we maximize this space? How can we make better use of this space? Just put carywise.com. Like, the context is that anyone who plies this road every day, in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you would have heard of carywise.com. And that's the snowball effect. You see a billboard, carywise.com, you recognize the name sticks in your head. The next day, you see a post from Carywise. Okay, who are these guys? Let me check them out. You see an ad from Carywise, you go to the Play Store, you download it. So we just understood the importance of being different because we know that being different makes you stick, gives you traction, right? And overall, it has always been, and because in marketing there's a playbook. The playbook in this case of a billboard states: put your copy, put your app, put your call to action, put your download here. Everybody does that. So if everybody does that, there's really nothing
How would you
fundamentally
stand out
different you get.
from
I mean, probably your only saving grace will be the kind of copy, but I mean, it's a billboard, so you even have a limit with the kind of copy that I can use. So, I mean, that's just another example. Basically, our approach communication wise is to, like I said, the first point is create content that people value, knowing fully well that if a customer finds a piece of content useful, there's a high chance that they'll share it with somebody else, which is the content loop. The second point is to say, how can we stay innovative? How can we stay different? How can we do what nobody else is thinking about? How can we do the opposite of what people are doing?
Very, very, very interesting answer. I think that one of the things that I really liked, about what you said was how you are very intentional about the special day campaigns that you put out. So so instead of just doing, oh, happy Father's Day, you do like a paint with dad, portrait with dad. Those are things that when you do them, everybody's like, okay, who is this brand that is taking extra intentionality, in creating memories for people? So that's good. I hope we are really taking notes, and I hope that we are learning, because this conversation is something that I'm really enjoying, and I hope you're picking out lessons from this. So building trust, I mean, you've been able to talk about how you have built memories, right, in people's minds, how you are innovative enough by putting out useful content and by changing the way you put out your content, right, to stick in people's minds. But I also know that there is trust, right? And I know that building trust is not a small thing, especially in the times that of Ponzi schemes. I remember a couple of years ago we had there were these Ponzi schemes that came up, right? And a lot of people lost their money when the people ran away, and so that in itself has even given a bad rep to digital solutions, digital fintech companies. So people are like, look, I'm not putting my money in anything that is not a bank. Is either I put my money in the bank or I put it in my house, right? They don't even want to listen to when you say investment, I'm not interested. So what are some of the challenges that you have faced in communicating, trust, and how have you been able to address those challenges?
I like that you're laughing. It also feels like you have lost money somehow.
I've lost money.
Okay. Trust. So I think the trust is something you communicate per se. Yeah, I don't think anyone comes on social or their email to say you can trust us. I mean we have like T's and C's. We let people know we are SEC licensed.
Yeah.
We let people know that we have a custody structure. We let people know that we follow we abide by corporate governance and framework, right? Those are the kind of things that dictates that we can't invest in certain assets, for example. So, for example, like Caribas can never, ever, ever invest in crypto. Like, it's not even possible at all.
Okay.
Right? And that's because we have that framework that we have to abide by from the SEC that tells us guidelines that these are the kind of things that we can invest in. For example, if we create any investment products, SEC has to approve it. They have to give us a no objection. And in the context of whatever the product is, we need to specify like what kind of asset classes people's money will be invested in and those kind of things. So to a large extent, nobody comes out to say like you can trust me, because if I come and tell you can trust me, you're going to feel like I'm shady. Like, why am I saying this? So I think contextually, trust is earned, trust is shown, is not particularly said. So it's really not in the things that we do as a brand. If you come on the platform, what's your experience, right? If you withdraw your money, do you get it? If you have issues, are they resolved on time, right? It's those little experiences that shape trust. It's not the kind of thing you communicate over time, but I think it's the kind of things that you do. And the major ambassadors will obviously be existing users. They are more likely the ones to champion the product to others.
That's true.
Right. So even if you are having misgivings, typically what we have seen is that they are the ones that will convince you that, hey, I've been using this product since 2021. I've never really had any issues. Like my money safe. I withdraw it. When I withdraw, I get it when I need it. So to that extent, like I mentioned, it's not something we say, right? It's something that we have seen that over times customers advocate for us on our behalf, right? They tell others that we are safe. I've used them for so and so time. It's also for example, on social media, we have will I call it a first respondents policy type of thing,
Okay,
where,
what's
for
that
example,
about?
if there's a downtime on payment channels or maybe like NIPS, for example, which will obviously affect things like withdrawals. You might easily have a lot of customers like complaining like, hey, I'm trying to withdraw, but I can't get it at the time I want, or I'm getting an error or something like that. One of the things we try to make sure we do is to ensure that at least everyone is attended to. And attended to in this context is not that the issue will be resolved, but that we let you know that we are on the issue. Right. So in this context, it can be maybe someone from the marketing team or someone from the customer experience team. Like you have people complaining. I make sure that we tell you. And I think that's the important thing about communication.
Yeah.
There's
You
something
don't
there's
wait until
something
you have a
there's
solution per
something icky
se.
about me complaining and then an hour, 2 hours later, like no one has said
Yes,
anything.
said
Those are the
anything.
kind of things that build mistrust. Right?
True.
Is those little experiences. Like I complained about something, you
Nobody
guys
said
didn't get back to
anything.
me, you guys are not saying anything. There's just something. So even if someone on my team is online, they don't, maybe for example, they might not have full context of what the problem, but they make sure to say, hey, I've seen your complaints, I've passed it on to the right people, we are working on it, we are going to get back to you soon, don't worry, nothing's happening to your money, you're good. So
That's
it's
so
very, very
good.
important. And I think that's what I mean when I say trust is not something that you say, it's something that you do. Right. It's also for people who we have a lot of people also come to the office sometimes to get right. So, and I think some people are still fairly traditional. They are still used to going to a bank to complain.
Yeah.
So when they have issues, they like walk into the office,
Oh,
and which is
really?
why every day of the week, and I mean we work on a hybrid system, right?
Yeah.
So which means most people don't come every day. Like most people just we are usually filled on specific days, but on most days CX has to be around in case there's a walking customer. There are customers that they just feel comfortable talking.
Yeah.
They want to look you in the
I want to
eye.
see the person
Exactly.
that is holding my money
Exactly.
in their
They want
mind.
to look you in the eye. They want to lay their complaint and they want to make
Yeah.
sure it gets resolved. They want to talk to a human being face to
True.
face, right? So it's really all those little experiences that help to build that trust over time. It's not something that is going to happen like once. It's timely,
Very
which is
good.
why I'm also very particular about your experience within the product. Like when you're navigating from one page to the other, what's your experience with topping up? Do you have issues when you top up? Can you reach customer service on the app? When you are withdrawing, like, do we tell you that, hey, you're trying to withdraw to this bank, but this bank is having a downtime, don't withdraw to that bank yet? So it's really all those little experiences that help us to build that trust over time. I mean, I've spoken to people. I remember we had a conference in 2022. I can't remember quite what the conference was about, but and after I spoke, one of the participants came to me and she was like, all this one that you're saying, you're just you're speaking
just
English,
talking.
because apparently she invested in something, not Ponzi at the time, but I think it was I don't want to say legit business, but it was an outfit that poised itself as a business. I remember she saying that she lost 6 million, and I can't even imagine losing 6 million like right now. So
That's
to
just
people like
crazy.
that, there's nothing you can say.
Yeah.
You can't tell, don't worry, madam, trust me, your money is like,
Trust
there's no way
what?
she can ask, there's no way she can give you a dime,
True.
because that person that she gave 6 million to also told her to trust the person, right? And
True.
which is why it's not about words, it's really about
Your action.
your brand power to a large extent, but also your action, which is
Yeah.
why, like, someone like that, most likely it's not us that will convince her. It will be someone that knows
Maybe a
someone that
relative
uses the
that
product,
has used the
that can say,
product for a
don't
couple of
worry, this
years.
product legit, I've used it from da 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 da. If you have any issues, like, I know you can reach out to them on Twitter. It's just those little things that help to build trust.
Very, 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 very good answer. So some of the things that I picked up is that trust is not necessarily in your words, it's in your actions, number one, and it's the
Yes.
small things that you use. It's in the small things that you do. So whenever you have issues, or maybe your consumers have an issue and they are complaining, if you're trying to build trust, you have to answer immediately. Just let them know that you are on it, rather than waiting until you have
It resolved.
the solution particularly panned out, right? And another thing is to make sure that the experience for the customer is top notch, so that they can now act as testimonials to other people that you might not necessarily be able to even speak to or reach. That's so good. So fintech is usually at the mercy of different conditions. I would say, like, different regulatory issues that happen. So tomorrow a bill can be passed that can affect a fintech, the fintech space, right? So how do you stay agile and communicate effectively in terms when market volatility happens, or there's regulatory uncertainty in that sense?
The way we have built Carrywise fundamentally is lean, right? Our staff strength is, I think, about 50, 52.
Really?
Yeah, and that cuts across departments. So this is HR.
Wow.
Okay, we don't call them HR. Sorry, people and culture. People and culture engineers, both back end, front end. The mobile engineers, iOS, growth, marketing. Like, I think about 50. And we built it deliberately that way, right? Keeping the headcount lean, because leanness also has some certain advantages. It helps you stay more agile. Compared to having an over bloated headcounts where communication has to go through several channels. You want to make changes, has to go through several approvals. So we have kept it lean on purpose so we can stay agile.
That's
right?
good.
I think the second thing we have done is to abide by certain principles. So one of the principles we adopt is, and this is obviously a people and culture thing, is what we call freedom and responsibility, right? And I think it's one of the things that we picked up from how Netflix was built, right? I know there's a book about it, I think, called No Rules Rules. No Rules Rules, yeah. And the context is that we have been very deliberate to employ high performers. Because if you give high performers a large level of freedom, right, and they tend to be responsible, because high performers tend to want to get the job done, right? They don't need to be handheld. They don't need to be micromanaged, right? So a combination of those two things has helped us make sure we stay lean, but make sure we also stay extremely agile. So in this case is that if there is, for example, let's say monetary policy change, like from the CBN, that maybe interest rates go up or go down, we have a portfolio team that is already aware. Like, they're already aware. They probably even join the podcast, so they are aware of the changes. So it's now for them to be able to pass it on to markets, to be able to say, hey, that this change has occurred. We need to communicate to customers that this is what they'll be getting when they do da 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 da.
Yeah.
It's also now for them to communicate with the back end to say, hey, based on this new change, this is what we need to do on the back end to reflect when people are putting their money in the app. That's just like a basic example of how the leanness and agility has helped us. And these are obviously things that it doesn't have to go through like the CEO or the CEO. You know what to do.
And you do it.
Because that's what you're employed to do.
Yeah.
You know that when there's a change, that this is how it will affect your infrastructure. It's the same thing with, I can't remember what policy it was. If it was SEC, I can't quite remember. But I know there was something, I think in 2022 or 2023, about improving our KYC. So at the time, I know we didn't used to ask for BVN on sign up, right?
Okay.
But based on the changes, I can't quite remember what the policy was about, but I know it had something to do with KYC, right? And that's another example of where agility comes into play, because that now meant that we had to review the entire onboarding.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, we don't want to fall into the bad books of any compliance or have any compliance issues. So that now required that we optimize the onboarding flow to reflect the policy.
Yeah.
So in this case, which is why if you try to sign up now, we'll ask you for your BVN. And it's also just important for us because you can't withdraw money to an account that is not tied to your BVN. So if I, as Grillo Adeyimi, am using CarryWise and I want to withdraw, it has to be to my BVN linked bank, which is why we need your BVN, right? So I think that's a typical example of where agility comes into play, like vis-a-vis changes in policies. Like we have cut out too many communication gaps to make sure that there is a direct line of communication between respective parties and respective teams, so that when issues arise such as this, we can get them done fast.
That's really good. Leanness and agility are the two things that I picked up, and I like what you said. You don't have to have like a robust team so that you don't have to go through approvals
Multiple layers,
and then employ high achievers that have a sense of responsibility when there's freedom, right? Which is even some of the things that we imbibe even at Newmark Group Limited as well. So very quickly, digital platforms are key. Everybody is talking. I mean, I'm in the PR space, marketing space. Everybody's talking about digital, going digital. The traditional methods are not working anymore. So very quickly, just let me know, how has CarryWise been able to work and collaborate with influencers, media outlets and other fintech players to enhance your credibility? Just, very quickly.
Okay, so I think over time, the way we conduct marketing has evolved, right?
True.
And like I mentioned initially when I talked about the billboard thing at the beginning of the conversation, we have always tried to experiment, like in small pockets, then
I remember
scale.
you said that.
So I would say even as at now, I think we have tried most things. I know before I came in 2022, I think in 2021, they did something with influencers. Right? If I remember correctly, the big influencers in the day, I think Maraji. You probably still find one of our videos of CarryWise on Facebook. I think I still bumped into it like some months ago. So I've worked with influencers in the past. Like I mentioned, we just recently started working on more media approaches, in this case billboard, and we're also considering other channels as well. So over time it has evolved, and because it's important for us to put our money in channels that we know to a large degree that work, right?
Sure.
We have a responsibility to manage money, right? Not to splurge money. I mean, it doesn't make sense for a wealth manager to not manage our own money. Like it doesn't make sense. Like so we try a lot of things. We test on a small scale, and if it doesn't work, we move on to something else, right? So to date, I mean, there are a couple of channels that we know that work, and I think that's the interesting thing about channels, which is why, I mean, your question about people saying traditional doesn't work anymore, it's expected because what you see is that there's always something we call channel saturation. So in this case is that for example, let's say Newmark, you guys propose something to a client, and 5 years ago you said TikTok, right? 5 years ago, TikTok would have been extremely effective because not many brands were on TikTok. Right? But and that's the thing about channels, and that's the thing about communication strategy. Like once one person does it, other people join.
Sees that they join the bandwagon.
So after a while, it gets saturated. It doesn't work the way it used to.
And then you have to
do something else. So what we have always done is to always try to look for different things that can give us that hockey stick growth. Knowing fully well that we will try, let's say, influencer marketing, we'll grow, but after a while, it doesn't work as well as it used to.
Yeah.
It might work, but it might just mean you have to spend more money. So it's the same thing with digital channels like the Google, the Facebook. You have to spend more money because everybody
now is doing that.
And we know, like, I mean, I can't fight the big brands when it comes to ad spend. I don't have the ad spend. I can't fight with the big brands, the banks. They have more. So which is why the context of being creative and innovative comes into play, because I can't fight on that level playing field. I have to create my own field, right? So we have tried a lot of things, and I think to your conversation, it's really not about traditional not working. I think it's how it works. I think any business should approach it from a multi-channel perspective,
Perspective
because
as
I mean
opposed to
your customers are there. Your customer will see a billboard, they'll be on a podcast. So
yeah.
I think it's now the how. Right. For example, a couple of years ago, I know MCN, they did this thing, this man in the box thing. It was supposed to be like a normal billboard. Everybody was in a billboard, but they did a man in the box.
Okay.
So what they did was they were talking to businesses at the time. Then they created a sort of billboard where they used like a container to make an actual room, right? And the front was like clear glass. Then a message at the side about something for businesses. But you could see the man there every day.
Yeah.
Right. So everyone driving past are like, oh, well, there's one man in the sky. We're like, what's going on here? Right. So that's one of the like small things when I talk about looking for innovative ways. It's still a billboard, but it's fundamentally different from how every other person uses the same billboard.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I think what I'm picking, from that is that really, with everything that people are saying, there's no one size fits all kind of. You have to use what works for you, but make sure that you are using it creatively and innovatively. I feel like that's one of the things that's that's so amazing. That's good. So Nigeria's audience is diverse. We have so many tribes in Nigeria, and how has localized messaging so let me rephrase. So how has Carrywise been able to use localized messaging to reach, these rural areas?
Well, I'll say so far.
Is there an instance where maybe you've used like Pidgin or Yoruba to like communicate?
Not yet.
Interesting. Okay.
Not yet. And I mean it's expected, since that Lagos is our home base. As much as Lagos is diverse, most people in Lagos speak, at least in the urban areas of Lagos, speak English, right? But like I mentioned when I was talking about the partnership with Lagos State, is that so from a wider comms perspective, like we have maintained like the standard of the brand, so it has always still been English, right? But I mean, chances are that if we do, for example, expand to other states where other languages are predominant, I think it would be, I mean, any brand would do that. It'd be unwise to be so arrogant that you want to, you must do English. It's really about the customers, and you want to make sure that the customers get what you're trying to say, right? So I think that's really the most important thing. So far we haven't had any need to do anything localized per se, except like I mentioned the
onset with the Lagos State.
The thing with the partnership with Lagos State, where we know we have to speak in those languages to communicate the context of financial literacy. So whether it's from Yoruba or Igbo or Hausa, we have employed like facilitators that can translate, right? So that we make sure that the context is not lost. But currently, as of now, we haven't really had any need for localization yet.
That's good. At least I like that it's something that is currently in the works, because a lot of brands shy away from, would I say, using other languages apart from, because you feel like, okay, it's English, everybody's using English, but some of the brands that have been able to use things like Pidgin now to communicate, or to use maybe Yoruba, for example, to communicate. The person who is in the village, if that person watches it on TV or hears it on the radio and say, this person is, communicating to me in my language, right? And so they'll even be more attuned to want to listen to what they have to say. So I like that, even with Carrywise, I mean, I understand that there has not been any use for it, but it's something that's currently in the works with the CSR that you're currently. So would you, is that, so to even ask a question now, so what you're currently doing, is that a form of CSR that Carrywise took up?
Yeah, CSR is the best way to describe it, actually, right? So I mentioned no women left behind.
Yes,
right? So that's the overarching concept, right? So it's definitely a CSR. It's just really us saying, how can we give back? I know, like I mentioned, it has never really been about we want to
We want to,
onboard them. It's really
yeah, we
about
want to
making
do
sure
this so that we
that
can make more money.
exactly, it's really about giving back and making sure that financial literacy is something that is not the reserve of the 1%. It's not the
That's
reserve of the
true.
2%. That
Very
everyone
good.
should be financially literate. So yeah, so
Yes.
CSR is the best way to describe
Yeah.
it.
So I think that whenever we're doing businesses, we should also think to giving back, to our communities, right? They don't necessarily have to come to your brand, but I feel like if more brands are very intentional about CSR and, giving back to the community, educating them on some of the things that they're doing, it would make a better Nigeria. And once we have a better Nigeria, I mean, it's better for all of us.
Yeah,
Okay.
which is why which is why this CSR thing, it's like I mentioned, like how we have done marketing has evolved over
Yeah,
time.
true.
So I mean, this year I know we kicked off with Lagos State's partnership, and we're actually running two CSR, which is why it's weird.
Oh,
Right, the second one
interesting.
was basically a we called it football for good. So what we did was to have like a 1 day tournament, where we invited businesses to come and play in the tournament, and
Wow.
obviously winner takes all. But I think the larger idea was the tournament was basically to launch the CSR program, which was that we want to raise funds for kids in school. So the goal is to raise 1 billion naira, and to say we'll use this 1 billion naira to help students that are in school, right? So in this
Wow.
case, maybe you're in the primary school, you can't afford school fees. We want to cater for your secondary school. If you're in university, you can get a scholarship. Yeah. So CSR is just also one of the things that we have dabbled into, at least in 2024.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So security and privacy, very quickly are, would I say, top concerns, right? People are always would I say, they are, what's the word now, they're skeptical, right, about putting their information, security, data privacy and all of that. So very quickly, what messaging has been most effective in addressing concerns around data privacy? Just very quickly.
So I think to a large extent, again, like I mentioned the thing about trusts. It's not something we say a lot.
Sure.
Right? Not I'm not going to come out on social. Hey, your data is private. When you say things like that, I just feel like there's something weird
fishy
going on. Right? But what I've done is to make sure that you get the information when you need it.
Okay.
So in this case is when you sign up, for example, you fall into, for example, an email campaign where one of the first set of emails we talk about is your BVN. Right, we talk about data protection. We talk about the fact that we are compliant, which is one of the reasons why we have a superstar legal team. A large part of what they do is to make sure that we are always compliant. That we have the infrastructure in place to protect people's data. But in terms of communication, it's not something we say outside. But basically, when you sign up, when you're coming, there are different parts of the customer journey where you bump into that information. So when you're signing up, when we ask for your BVN, we'll tell you why we need your BVN. We'll tell you that your BVN is safe because we are also subject to the Nigerian Data Protection Commission. We send it in emails regularly. Your BVN is safe with us. Your data is safe with us. And we really just try to be proactive in terms of ensuring that the customers know that we're taking extra steps to keep their data safe.
So proactivity,
right? So in this
is the
case,
game.
is that we make sure that, for example, we employ encryption. Your password is encrypted. Like even we internally don't know what your password is because it's now basically like a code, right? We don't know what it is. We have firewalls. We have built several backend infrastructure to make sure that people's data is safe. And we make sure that at different points of the customer journey that we relay that information to you, that your data is safe, like we're not going to share your data with anybody. And so it goes beyond just encryption, it goes beyond compliance, it even trickles down to things like employee training. Like the employees know that this data you're exposed to,
that's good.
This is what it's for. It's not for
any
it's not
other
for sharing
thing
with third-party partners. It's not for telling, like, I can't tell someone else's data. I have access to it. I only have access to it so I can help you. It's for your eyes only, right? So it trickles down to things like employee training, trickles down to things like making sure we have endpoint encryption, we have firewalls. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I think one of the things that I picked from what you say is that you don't necessarily communicate it. Again, it's in your actions, it's in the proactivity when there's an onboarding. It's what is there. So any customer can read it and they can see this they can see the laws that you have put in place to ensure that their data is safe. So, lastly, and this is just a random question.
Why do I feel like this is going to be a trick question?
Don't worry. If you could live the life of a character from any book, movie, or TV show for a week, who would it be and why?
I knew it was going to be a trick question. For a week. Let's see, character. I would say that. There's so many characters. There's so many
Just
characters out
pick
in my head.
one. Just pick one. Just pick one.
Yeah, I mean, I probably would pick. Let me see. I mean, I'm a big fan of Greek mythology.
Oh, interesting.
So if I was to go in that route, I would probably pick Odysseus, I guess.
Why?
I mean, I recall there was a movie they did about him, I think in the early 90s, that I can't forget. It's one of those very old, no, not 90s, probably 80s actually, Odyssey.
Really?
Yeah, so he told the story of Odysseus clearly. So he was fighting on the side of the Greeks against the Trojans during the Trojan War.
Okay.
That was when after I think about 10 years, the Greeks, and that's where they got the Trojan horse from.
Yeah.
The Greeks built some wooden horse and just took advantage of the belief system of Troy, hit soldiers into it, then they kind of defeated them overnight after fighting for over 10 years.
Wow.
But I think probably the reason why I'll pick Odysseus is because Odysseus was, I mean, I don't want his arrogant side, sure, but he was a very sound strategist. He was a good fighter. He was a great leader. He was a loyal follower. His boys liked him. He commanded the respect of kings and equals.
Interesting.
But I think basically because he was very intelligent, he was very good with strategy. I mean, at least for that last part, he was pretty good. So,
With
and I mean, I
strategy.
think I love strategy. So
Yeah, I can say. I was just about to say that I've seen from from this conversation that you are a master strategist.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be. Thank
well,
you.
well, I think you're already there though, right? Thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
Yeah.
I'm sure because I had a wonderful time, listening to most of
I
what
did
you
too.
said and even having this conversation. And I'm sure that our listeners and our viewers have learned a lot. I will personally, even after this, go back to watch this video because I want to take notes. I wasn't able to take notes here, but I'll go back to listen and take notes.
Yeah, I think I also need to listen to myself. Actually.
Yeah, because you really there were some wisdom nuggets that you were really spewing out. It was good. It was so good. So lastly, a fun PR fact is that the Guinness World Records was created as a PR campaign to promote Guinness beer, and that is what has now become a global phenomenon. You can imagine.
Really?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes. Yes, and our very own Hilda Bassi, and there's this guy who also won the paint. Yeah, the artist. And we have they just started it to promote Guinness beer initially.
Another example of doing things differently.
Yeah, another example. So I think this, the sum total of this conversation is that whenever we are doing things for your users, make sure that you are thinking creatively, make sure that you are innovating in the way you put out, campaigns, in the way you communicate to your users. Make sure that you are doing things differently because that is how you will stand out. I am your host, Toluwani Shoniro. Thank you so much for joining. Bye. Bye-bye.